Okay, time for the old man to get on the soapbox again and give you my 2 cents worth about the latest shooting in Texas. Now, I'm not even going to begin to try and pronounce the name of it, of the town, because I know I'll get it wrong. And a lot of people won't care about my 2 cents worth, but here it is. You know, I don't know if people realize this, but when you look back at your life and your beginnings, and compare them to today, things always seem better than they were. Now, that being said, in some ways they were better. I mean, there was some violence. Most of the time, when I was in school, I never saw anything even remotely like this. I mean, I grew up in a rural area in Pennsylvania, and we never had anybody shooting up anything. All the farm kids used to come in with their pickup trucks, and pretty much in every pickup truck was a gun rack. And in the gun rack, there was their hunting rifle, because either they were going hunting before school or after school. Now, these same kids, farm kids, now not everybody went to that school with a farm kid, but uh, all the ones who were, you used to see that on their belt was a little sheath where they kept their pocket knife. Nobody was ever shot. Nobody was ever stabbed. Uh, and if you go back even further, for those of us who are old enough to remember, there used to be this store which you might be able to find a couple still around called Sears. And in the days way before the internet, there used to be this thing called the Sears Catalog. And it was always interesting, when you got the catalog, look at all the new stuff, and especially the Christmas one. All the kids just loved the Christmas one because they knew to pick out what they wanted for Christmas. But in searching the internet, I have found pictures of an old Sears catalog, and on the cover, they had a picture of a family made up with husband, wife, and two kids, a boy and a girl. And each one of these individuals is holding a hunting rifle or shotgun of some kind. Because back in those days, parents were educating their children about how to use firearms, about how to, because especially out in the country, you had the boys would go out with their father hunting, or, if they were out somewhere away from home and the women were at home, they had to know how to defend themselves, so people taught their family members how to use firearms. There's more knowledge and more education it's funny because Whoopi Goldberg was on The View just the other day, spouting off about how it should be illegal to have an AR-15 when an AR-15 fires at the same rate as you would shoot a hunting rifle. It's not automatic. It doesn't fire at. I mean, it looks fierce, but it doesn't. It doesn't have rapid capabilities. And some people feel that, well, why do you need a gun? You just trying to protect your stuff. Well, no, it's first of all, someone coming into my house, you need to watch out because this isn't about the stuff. Stuff can be replaced. The people nowadays are getting bolder, I should say more bold, and nowadays they will kill you for looking at them wrong. Or if you don't have what they expect, they'll kill you. So this isn't so much about protecting my stuff, it's about protecting my family and my loved ones. Now, what does this have to do with Texas? Well, when I was fresh out of the military, I was in my early 30s, and I qualified for a program where I was able to go back to school. Of course, I didn't take effect. It took a couple of years for this to happen, so I was in my late 30s by the time I was able to go back to school. And I was in my first semester at Tennessee State University. And in my freshman history class, whenever something big occurred in the news, we would talk about it in history because that was future in the making. Well, this was right around the time when the incident at Columbine happened. And we were discussing it, and our professor was an older black lady, and I use the term black because as a descriptive term, I don't use terms like African American or Native American or Asian American because those are more racist and divisive than anything. Those terms are putting you into groups. I mean, I see people as American. If you're an American, I don't care what color you are, you're an American. But anyway, getting back on the topic, we were talking about what had happened, and people were giving their own theories about this. And I raised my hand, and the professor, she had this big smile on her face, and she called me in, and I said, would you be interested to hear an older person's perspective? And she just kind of smiled and nodded. I said, number one, and you have to remember this was in 1999. It was almost a new century about to begin, end of a decade, beginning of a new century. And I said, kids nowadays have too much. And like you had the beginning of cell phones back then, but it wasn't like it is now. And of course, computers were nothing like they are now. But still, they had internet capabilities was around. There were people with video games and all this. And I told her, I said, kids today have too much. And she says, explain. I said, well, when I was a teenager in the mid 70s, what I had in my small bedroom was one of those old fashioned turntables, not like big set, but just the kind, you portable things, you in a little case type thing, and a clock radio. And that was it. I mean, the biggest thing I had was when my brother came home one time, and I don't know if my birthday or what it was, but he gave me a portable, handheld cassette recorder. And that was it. I mean, I didn't have video games and all kinds of technologies that kids have today. And I think that's part of it. I think that's a big part of it because I think the more advanced we become, if you look at society, the worse we become. I remember when in the first house I ever lived in, we had two phones, old fashioned phones, rotary phones. And those kind of phones, and those were the days of party lines. So you could be talking, somebody else was listening in to what you're talking about. We had two phones. We had one hanging on the wall in the kitchen, and the other one was in my parents' room. But that was it. I remember most families, you'd be in line at the store, and mom would be getting her purse, her wallet out of her purse. And what you see, she opened the wallet, and all these pictures are hanging there, and she's showing off all the pictures. Men normally had their wallets. They normally had a couple of important pictures of their loved ones in there. Now you can store your pictures. People have family albums. Now people store their pictures on their phone or their laptop or whatever. It's like, and you have to dig and search and find them. It's too much. But I'm not getting off topic. I'm trying to prove a point about society. And that is that in my eyes, I remember in the 80s when I was in the military and we weren't on duty, and a couple of us, we'd be walking around the mall, and we'd be seeing young kids, small. I mean, they were teenagers, but they were young, like 13, 14. And these kids had pagers. I mean, back then, you had to be like big, important businessman or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever to have a pager, but parents were getting their kids pagers, and they would page them, and then they had to find the phone and try and call them. Now it seems like every kid has a phone, and they're getting younger. I mean, he used to see young parents with a baby, and the baby is start fussing, Kids like shiny things, so parents would break out the keys and shake them in front of the baby's face, to kind of get their attention, kind of get them to stop crying or whatever. Now at young age, people are handing over their phone to their children so that they can play with them so that they won't cry. There is no reason in my idea, why children need a cell phone. I think every home should have a regular phone, and if they need to get a hold of you, then they call that phone. I remember the good old days when the phone rang, you answered it no matter what because you didn't know who it was calling. And this is days before answering machines. You just answered it. Nowadays, people, if they don't recognize the number, they don't answer it when it might be something important. But getting back to the current situation, I said in that class, I think that kids nowadays have too much, and I still say that today they have too much. But that's not the only issue. I don't think that parents are teaching their children discipline. And I'm not saying all parents are, but I'm saying a good majority aren't disciplining their children when they do wrong. And I'm not talking about wailing on your kid in the middle of Walmart, which you'll see some people do that. There's a difference in my book, a difference between spanking a child and beating a child. And, most parents have more than one trick in their arsenal. So there are times when you spank your child. There's other times when you take something away of theirs, especially as they get older, when spanking's not going to do it. You take away their video games, or you don't let them drive their car for a week or whatever. You do whatever to get your point across, because as we get older, it's harder, because once you get out in the real world, it's hard. So you have to get them to realize that there are consequences for doing what people do. Now, whenever something like this happens, there's always this real big debate about guns. You have to understand that, like Columbine and like the shooting in Texas, the guns are just a tool. They could just as easily have brought a knife or something far worse than any gun, which I won't talk about because I don't want to give people ideas. But the gun is just a tool. And if you look at these individuals who are doing this, there's obviously some underlying thing which is very wrong with them. That why would they decide to go into a school like in Columbine and shoot their classmates and teachers, or in this case, to go into an elementary school and shoot a bunch of little kids? there's something not right in the head. Now, from what I've heard, they said that they haven't really, this individual never really had any kind of testing in this area. But there had to be some things going on inside these people's heads of why they do this. And so there had to be signs where somehow people are missing. And so I think perhaps what they need to do is give more training to teachers and others about how to, if you see something which you think is out of the ordinary, I mean, you don't have to be a psychiatrist or psychologist. If you see something that you think isn't right, then you need to bring it up to somebody, especially up in higher school. And it's not just teachers or police officers or medical professionals or whatever, it's everybody. If you see something about an individual that you don't think is normal, then you need to bring it up to somebody. I don't care who you need to bring it up to, because this person then it's obviously a cry for help, and this person can get the help if you bring it up. I mean, they might be mad at first, but it's better than them going in and shooting up a bunch of people. Now, another underlying issue was how this individual got into the school. Most schools nowadays have these magnetic doors, which unless you have a key, you have to buzz a buzzer, which is heard in the office, and they have to let you in. Now, from what I've heard, the door he got into was not a regular door used by everybody. It was a door which was probably used by janitors or whoever. And for some reason, it was not locked. If this is not a magnetic door, these doors need to be locked at all times, and the people who have access to these doors need to have the key they use so they can get back in if they have to go out. As much as people want to say this is a gun issue, it's not a gun issue. This is an issue about how you raise your children. And I mean, unfortunately, there are some children that come from good homes. They're given everything they want. They do chores and they do everything you think a normal family would do. But sometimes these kids have something wrong inside them and they just go nuts. I mean, this individual, I don't know what this person's background was, but before he even went to the school, he shot his grandmother in the face. I mean, there had to be some signs going on there somewhere that led up to him doing this. Normally, when you hear about these serial killers who, one of the things that they always say, when they're interviewing the landlords or friends or family, whatever, first thing you generally hear is about how quiet and reserved they were. And one of the first things I heard about this man right here is about how quiet he was. So I tell you, any decent law-abiding citizen will have no problem about doing a background check, do whatever to get the gun, because it's not the law-abiding citizens you have to worry about when it comes to firearms. And people say, well, if they're under 17, if they're under 18, they shouldn't have a gun. Blah, 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 blah. Like I said, in the old days, normally if a child had a gun, it was a hunting rifle, and they were educated on how to use it and how not to use it. So you need to educate your children about these things. Education's key in everything. So what's the moral of the story? The moral is that in this ever-changing society, if you try and regulate things, that's when you're going to have issues. Don't stop on people's Second Amendment rights by saying, well, you can't have this gun, or you can't have that kind of gun, whatever. That's not the issue. The issue is, number one, how you bring up your kids. Make sure that they understand about discipline, about consequences, what happens if you disobey. The issue is, don't spoil the kids. I know I've heard this my whole life. Well, I didn't have this as a kid, I'm going to give my kids this. No. Teach your kids that if they want something, they have to earn it. I mean, I'm not saying when they're young they have to get a job, but they can do stuff around the house that they can earn money so they can get the things they want. And don't give your kids everything, because they're not going to get everything once they get out of school. Unless they become a cyber millionaire or whatever, it's not going to happen. And number three, you have to be ever observant. By that I mean you're not looking over your shoulder 24/7. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, you have to just keep an eye out. If you're in a group of people and you notice that one of your friends or family members is acting different, is doing stuff that they never did before. And I'm not saying that all of a sudden they're going skydiving or doing whatever. No, I mean, if they're doing things which you think is kind of odd, which is normally not their personality, and tell somebody, tell a family member, tell your teacher, tell your boss, to whoever, just because a big part of this, especially nowadays, is with mental health. And you never know what's going on inside that person's brain. The guy who waves to you every morning with a big smile on his face, but never says a word to you. If you say hi to him and they're still not talking to you, you might want to back off until you find a way to maybe get them to talk. Like I said, I'm just giving you my 2 cents worth, but what is 2 cents in this day and age, right? These are just some things to think about. especially when it comes election time. You have to ask yourself if the people that you help put in office, are they doing the things that you hoped that they would do? And if they're not, especially at this time and place, then maybe they need to be replaced. Just something to think about. Peace out.